And that's the little Russian, no, thank you. And that's the little Russian I speak, so bear with me. I'm absolutely honored and pleased to be here. Thank you very much for having me. It's my first time in Russia, my first time in Moscow, my first time in this room, my first time on this stage. I hope we'll have a good time. I'll be speaking about the city as a playground and what we can do with the city and how to make it more playful. Something that I have been aspiring to do and work on for the past 200,000 years. No, that's a joke. For a while now. Without further ado, we should get started. We'll try to have the presentation on there. I could do this without the presentation. Probably better for you if you see some slides. Nah, maybe not. So just a few words. I know I've been announced, but I want to give you a bit of background, not for long. It's kind of the boring stuff, you know, housekeeping. I am what I call an explorer for Deconium, a German company that's been around for over 20 years, and we have, as of recently, become a Volkswagen participation, and I am one of the people who look at the future of mobility in the city, a future of entertainment in combination with mobility, etc. I'm also a professor at an Australian university. So what I do is I clone myself. So one flies to Australia, one stays in Europe, and the third clone actually also lives in Switzerland, where I teach at the University of St. Gallen, the executive school, and I do all the weird stuff that CEOs never are allowed to do when they work in operation. I take them to canoeing. What's that? There's 1, 2, 3. All of them. All right, so I'll try the second one. Nope. Next slide, please. So there's 4 chapters today. One, I will talk about the livable city a little bit and through the lens of play. And 2, I will talk about smart cities. I don't like the term per se, but it's been used, so we all sort of can agree what that means. Digital technologies obviously have done something there with games, and that sort of reflects in how we live in the city. Thirdly, I want to talk a little bit about innovation. And fourthly, I want to talk about the how-tos and what are the rules that we're giving ourselves when we bring these 2 aspects together, play in the city. Next slide, please. So we'll start off with this, the livable city. Next slide, please. What's really astounding is, and you might have seen these indexes before, is that when we look at, this is from the Economist Intelligence Unit, and every year, right, someone looks at what are the most livable cities in the world. And the factors they use to measure this are stability, healthcare, culture, environment, education, and infrastructure. Infrastructure, stuff like mobility, how you get around places, transportation. What's really astounding is, and this is of course a bit of an advocatus diaboli question, is where is playfulness in this? Why should we care? Right? We could also say, whatever, Steffen, come on, go home, like, just do something else. Eat chips. So, one initial moment in my life when I really got kick-started with the question, what's play in the city, was when I was in Berlin, in Spandau, playing this. And I didn't bring a video, but it's really a kind of cool installation. Actually, they've embedded a glockenspiel into the ground. So you can imagine they play boo 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 boo. So I was like, oh man, this is kind of cool, you know, like it's using the terrain, it's bringing music, play into the world, and I got really fascinated. Next slide, please. So I wrote a book. Yeah, that's what you do. Actually, that's not quite true because we edited this book, right? So we brought together a bunch of people, architects, game designers, and we asked the question, what is it that play and the city are having to do with one another, and how are these conditions changing with digital technology? Thank you. On the screen. We'll test this in 1 second. You stand here until it's, right, it's done. We want to have proof. Yay! So, yes, you can get that book or probably go to your library and look it up. So the fascinating thing there was like, okay, there seems to be a long tradition of games and play in the city. And then I decided I wanted to have a PhD, God knows what for. They tell you get more money paid after you've done it. Yes, well, any PhD students here in the room? Raise your hand. Yeah. No? Maybe. Maybe you're lucky. So I decided to do my dissertation on the topic, right? And what I did is I really looked at, first historically, what's the traditions, what are the examples of play in the city. And there is lots, right? And you see them every day. There's the kindergarten, there's the playground. There's the theater, there's the stadium, there's the casino. Ooh. There's lots of other places, and if you look at this historically, socio-historically, you'll see for a while cities, entire cities would be playgrounds. In Italy, they would battle city versus city. They would bar for a few days, a little bit like a carnival-esque sort of time. They would bar off the entire city so people could play. Basically, it was an excuse to punch other people in the face, right? That was more or less like trying to keep things easy and non-violent. A little bit like football. Like Germany did super well here in Russia last year. Yeah, that happens. So I found through this research that there is an intricate relationship between the two, and what happens with digital technology is that it unleashes play to wherever we are or wherever this is, right? Because this is a platform for computing, and games and play are very, very, very good at processing rules. That's what games are all about, right? And these devices and everything that becomes a computing device is so very good at processing rules, it's kind of crying out loud, give me a game. And this is the big difference now compared to the olden days, where we would create space and typically would bar away play, right? Yeah, put the kids into the kinder, all the sports dudes go into the stadium, all the gamblers go to the casino, right? So there were constraints, spatial constraints. Now, with what we call ubiquitous computing, computing that can be anywhere, that doesn't apply anymore. So there's a big shift there. And there's many other shifts in the same kind of argumentation, line of argumentation, where that applies to everything. Everything becomes computed. So I, at the time, around 10 years ago, found that, and we built stuff. Also, we looked at other precursors in architecture and urbanism, such as the guys around Guy Debord, the Situationists. Anyone familiar with the Situationists? Raise your hands. Thank you. Can you tell us what the Situationists did? What was the idea? No? I'll tell for you, okay? No problem. All right, here's one of the ideas that the guys had. They found that the modern city, particularly in the West, was subject to utilitarian thinking and doing, right? It was subject to the way capitalism was functioning. So they said, let's tear it apart. Let's pretend that we have a map of London, but we walk Moscow. Let's go on a drift. Let's reconnect the city the way that we want to connect it as the people. What they called the dérive, the drift, or the détournement, like the floating around and the very subjective experience of the city in a very, very playful fashion. That's what these guys did. And as you can see here, this is a map of Paris. They intended for you to rediscover. So discovery, of course, exploration, adventure is one way of playing, right? You know adventure games. So we basically... We created a very early so-called location-based game. And this game, and other colleagues have been doing these games also many years ago, but we were amongst the first to do this, where we took the city of Regensburg in Germany, UNESCO, World Heritage, la la la, old buildings, yawn, no one cares really. Young people don't care, it seems, which is very sad. And so we said, we need an alternative for the classical sightseeing tour, and that could be a game. And we took the idea of the situationists, and we said, we will connect all these historical landmarks that are in the city, and we will use modern technology. Modern, this is pre-iPhone and smartphone times, right? We had Nokia phones. And we programmed something where you would basically use magical gestures through camera tracking, where these gestures would basically root in a secret vocabulary that was runes, more or less, that were found on gravestones there. And if you did the right gesture, you would wake up a creature or a representative that would speak about these landmarks, and they would send you on quests to different parts of town. And what we did that way is we created a network. And that's what many adventure games do, right? But we did it in the city. So that ultimately is something that you can do, but there's colleagues, and I want to give these guys here a plug, a really awesome festival. If you ever have the chance and they tour this festival, you should really go to Playable City, where people use sometimes technology, sometimes just social mechanics to bring people together, to let them re-explore the city, rediscover the city. And that was pretty much what we did with Rexplorer. Now, fast forward in time, 8 years later, this came. So we were like, yeah. But look, as an academic, and you know the 3 hats that I showed, under that hat I thought, no, it's good, and I'm not the only one, by far not. There's so many other colleagues who, pretty much everyone who's in game design and studies game design has been creating their own location-based game. But if you, and who has played Pokemon Go here in this room? Many. Who's playing the new Harry Potter game? Do you like it? It's good? Good stuff, yeah? So the principles that are laid out with this type of game, whether you want to call it augmented reality, which is not really quite accurate, but that's a different type of discussion. But let's say what you do in Harry Potter and what you do in Pokemon Go is pretty much that kind of principle, right? So there's a new way of all of a sudden IP, and by IP I mean that this kind of game brings a different, very thick layer of creatures that live all of a sudden in the real world, which is cool. But if you really think about it, they don't have anything to do with the city as it is there, right? There's no landmark Pokemon that's specifically made or came and was born in Moscow. So maybe think about that a little bit, that there's wherever computing is, wherever your phone is, wherever some Internet of thing is, that is a potential platform for someone to kind of co-opt it. And I don't mean this negatively, I just want to raise the awareness that that's a fact, that's what's happening. But you could also say, we want to design a fantastic game for Moscow that is specific, right? That teaches people. So that sort of points us to the fact that there seems to be a very intricate relationship, again, not just between, let's say, games and play, how they could work mechanically, but also in terms of how they may have undergone a evolution, a coevolution. What do I mean by that? You don't have to read this part. There's not going to be an assessment afterwards, like a quiz or anything. Well, we could do it. No, not today. So, if you look back at the history of computing, you will see that games and play mechanics have, from the get-go, been like a bromance, like really good mates. Because, as I've said earlier, computers, rule processing systems, games consist of rules. So they are like this. And the first person to really, and this is probably sort of anecdotal, but it's to me something that sort of exemplifies this, Claude Shannon, one of the fathers of the modern computer, at least in the West, because there have been people in Russia, there have been people in Germany too, but let's say Claude Shannon, he wrote a very, very widely known and oft cited paper about what should a computer be like, and he chose the example of the chess game. So he built a chess computer to demonstrate what a computer should be like. So he chose a game. Found that extremely fascinating. That's why we went further with yet another book. And there will be less book talk, bear with me. Where we said probably the stuff that we're talking about doesn't only just apply to cities, it probably just applies to pretty much everything. Like to the way marketing is done, the way that Google knows where you're going and can predict what you're doing and maybe wants to reward that at one point. The way that cars become computing platforms and everything, the bloody elevator becomes a bloody computer, you know. Everything. The toilet. The Japanese have been doing this for a long time, so yeah, great computers there. So we said we probably should not just look at something that we call the Ludafication of culture, where we find game and play elements at a lot of places. And yes, you could even argue that historically they come from the military and etc., from psychology and testing subjects, which is all true. But we see this every day. Even if you go to Facebook and you like something, that's a little bit of a play element. You start collecting followers, right, on Instagram. You feel obliged to report, and then you look for positive rewards and positive sanctioning, people telling you, oh, this is fantastic, you know. So there is playful elements in a lot of the things that we're doing with computers these days. So we came up with this and said, ludification of culture. At the same time, there is something that we call the cultivation of ludus, where games themselves are changing. You know, there's the way that games are being produced from, there's not just big titles, right? I don't know what you guys play, but Call of Duty or Battlefield or whatever. Ludus means play. It's the basic principle that sits within, sits within all games is play, right? And so there is also cultivation of ludus, of the play itself. Why? Because we see how, before I answered that, how games are being produced by small teams. It doesn't require 30, 40, yes, you can build big games, but there's also small teams of 3, 4 people who can just very quickly make a game, right? There's a change in the perception of how games with digital technologies can be built, and that they should probably reach out to different types of audiences, not just the white male audience, maybe to women, to children, to God knows who. The Man in the Moon. Why not? Game for the Man in the Moon? Fantastic. So there's a change of the way that we look at games, and we classified this by saying, look, this is more coming from, and forget about these terms here, just think, here, this stuff, this is more play without rules, like chasing a leaf, right? That doesn't need a system of rules. Whereas the stuff up there, serious games and gamification, and I know this is in the title of the talk, is where we use play elements or games to address topics that are not flights of fantasy, such as training people, educating them by way of a game, teaching them, right? Inspiring them, maybe trying to persuade them, motivate them. So if you really think, let this sit a little and sick a little bit, then you will probably realize there's a lot of stuff that you do today with your apps that has play elements in it, right? Come again, we'll reward you. Why don't you take the next ride, right? As a taxi driver. So when we found this, we thought, well, maybe we could use this knowledge and just build stuff, lots of stuff. And before I talk about projects, I also want to talk a little bit about innovation. So in this discourse about games, the city, and what can play do for the city, and vice versa, we've also been looking at how is it that corporate environments are innovative, right? And if you look at them, you'll find that many of the most innovative companies say they engender creativity, play, and collaboration in order to come up with new ideas. So when you look at this and you look also at something like hacking, right? To have a hacking mindset, and I don't mean black hat hacking, to have a mean purpose. I mean to have the spirit and say, let's just very pragmatically build the thing, and then we'll try, and we test. We go back. If it sucks, we'll do it again. We'll test with people, right? We go very, very fast, and that's the principles that drive all this, and underneath the hood, you find a recurring pattern, which is play. So my question to you is, if we would apply this to the city, where are the places where we can do stuff very fast and try out and be very creative? You don't have to answer that question, but I want you to think about that. Where are places and times where we can be very creative with other people and be very speedy, and we don't need someone else's decision to just do something? This is where really cool stuff comes up and exists, into existence. So we looked into hacking, and I will spare you the techniques, but there are techniques. I won't spare them. One word, one hacking technique is to say, all right, this here is maybe the clicker to go to the next slide, but it could be something entirely different. It could be a walkie-talkie for kids, right? I could go, hey, beep, beep, okay, right? So it could be anything, because I recontextualize it. So this is what hackers do. We've been studying this quite extensively. You recontextualize, or you bring things together that you haven't thought together yet. And we'll play a game in a few minutes where we'll do exactly that. So this is not what we're going to do when we want to hack. We won't hack time, although it would be kind of cool, I guess. Who would like to hack time with me? Yeah. Yeah, me too. It's why that slide isn't there. Well, not today, sorry. But we'll talk about a few experiments that we've been doing, and this is super recent stuff. I've just showed this, I think, 2 days ago, where we had 4 projects. We did this within, I think, 3 or 4 weeks at Deconium, anchored in the idea we want to really talk about mobility in the city, and in Berlin specifically. And I'll talk about that. So the first thing that we did is, we work with Volkswagen a lot, right? So as for every automotive and car maker, it's very difficult to create things because usually you need a car in the end, right? So yeah, they're pricey and you might cause an accident, etc. So we're like, what would be a very fast way to just program and create new stuff very playfully? The first video, please, which is the self-parking car. Thank you. So in this first example, we're using a toy robot car, which we programmed in 2 hours to self-park, where the other guys who programmed this take half a year. And the code that runs on the thing is very, very similar to the code that you end up with in the real car, with all kinds of extra layers of security and la 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 la, right? So that's something that we, yes, and here's a bit of advertising for Adobe, thank you very much. Bing, 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 bing. That was supposed to be the money that just came into my account, which is not true. So, secondly, another project that we did very, very fast was we realized that, and I don't know much about Moscow and the type of mobility and shared services, etc. I know a little bit because of Nastya's superb hospitality in the past 2 days. Thank you very much, Nastya. Give her a hand. We realized that in Berlin there's lots of car sharing services, right? It's almost like a playground for all kinds of new mobility services. And we realized everyone is renting a shared car, but if that is so, that means there's so many people who only sit in the car by themselves. And that's idiotic. Because what that does is, and there's evidence for that, empirical evidence is, shared car services and all these taxi riding services, they don't create less cars in the city, they create more cars. Which is great for car makers, maybe. But it's not cool for us. No? It's not. So we said, why don't we have share, where we basically look for how many seats do you have available in your car that you could sub-share. If that makes sense. And you get then currency for sharing, which is the playful element, if you wish. And you can collect that currency and you can then enter someone else's car using the currency. Because this is really intended to be a sort of a communal thing, right? Sitting on top of every car sharing service. Side note, Volkswagen just rolled out the new e-Golf in Berlin with 1,500 vehicles as a sub-sharing service. A sharing service, not a sub-sharing service. So we might end up seeing stuff like that. But it's a simple and very fast idea. Here's another thing. This is not very playful, but it comes through the mindset of creating stuff very quickly with a playful and creative mindset. Here, and this is very Berlin, I did notice in the past 2 days that there's not a lot of bicycle riders on the big streets. And that is that correct? And because it would be bloody idiotic and dangerous, right? In Berlin, there's many bicyclists, many. And they are coming out of hell sometimes, right? They come from the wrong direction and etc. So most accidents, guess what is the main reason for bike accidents in Berlin and in all of Germany? What's that? Correct. How did you know that? Yes. Well, in specific, when people take turns, right? The driver, truck driver, van driver, car driver takes a turn, doesn't look over the shoulder, doesn't do the Copenhagen thing, the Dutch thing, you know the Dutch thing? So before you exit the car, you basically, what do? You do this. No, you do this, sorry. You use this hand, so you're forced to turn. You don't open the car door sitting on the left-hand side, right? We're speaking left-hand driving. You don't open the door like this. You are learning at driving school that you always have to open the door with this hand. So that way you force the torso to do this motion, which is kind of cool. There's a word for it, the Dutch something. Anyone knows this? Dutch something. Well, we call it the Dutchie. The Dutchie. Anyway, so the blind spot. Yes, so the blind spot, but the main problem is, yes, there is sensors in cars these days, and there will be more sensors, and radar, and LiDAR, and there's different types of sensors, but the principal problem is that the bike riders don't know that they are in the blind spot. Can we have the next movie, please, called Sight Spot? Should I go to the next slide? No, you do this. There you go. So this is a very, very first prototype that we created with an ultrasonic sensor, where basically you get a signal on an app, and we did this very quickly within a few days. And now we had the privilege to have the Berlin Senator of Traffic and Transportation in the house 2 days ago, and she saw this and she's like, I want to build this. She'll support it. So that was really cool. And just to give you an indication, we have around 1,500 bike accidents every year, where there's at least 15 deaths occurring, and many, many heavily injured people, right, coming out of that. Next slide, I can do this. Thank you, by the way, for the movie. Another example, which is not so easy to read, but something that we realized is when we go through the city, usually you want to go from A to B the fastest you can go. But maybe that's not a cool way to explore the city. Remember the whole adventuring thing and that repurposing and that recontextualizing. So we said, what if we programmed something where you could go through the city as peaceful as possible? Or a fitness route. And you can do this very easily. Be my guest. Just a layer on top of Google, and that's the way we should think about the city. The most playful route, the most colorful route, the coolest architectural route. That's the way you should think about the city. And lastly, we came up with something that might be physically impossible, but we said, what the hell, come on. Does it matter? No. So we have people who ride bikes a lot. All of my colleagues practically ride bikes. No one has a car. I'm the only person who has a car, and that's because I have kids. Thank you. So we said, why don't we equip e-bikes with a rim dynamo, and when you power the rim with the rim dynamo, you charge the battery at least a little bit, and then you pay less money for charging. So, yet another example, which takes me to the question of the how-to, right? So, you could argue that, remember this slide when I said, where's the playfulness? You could argue maybe play doesn't have a role. I hope that I showed you a few ways that it could have a role. But we're not yet at the end, getting there. But what we've been doing is we've also been creating entire products where we combined, and very strategically combined, play with and games and game elements, gamification if you wish, with aspects of the city that are usually taken to rate whether a place is livable and nice, a good place to live at. Healthcare. So, how many students are in the room? That's good. So, here's a really interesting study that shows that there is a relationship between cell phone use and physical and sedentary activity and the way that you're fit. do you understand what sedentary means? It's exactly what you're doing. Stand up, everyone, right now. Please do. Stand up. Standing up is good. I also do this because I know at this stage some people are starting to fall asleep. And this is, I know how it is. I know thyself, as they say. Know thyself. And it's the last lecture. And you're all looking forward to drinking your beer or your glass of wine. I know. And so sedentary activity, right, is one of the, has a clear indication and a clear connection to cell phone use, which means that people sit and they play around with their phone a lot. And that has an effect on their physical fitness. Which would lead us, if we continue to talk about this, which we could for hours, of course, maybe a entire life, God knows. Yes, we can do this. Let's jump a little bit. Come on, let's jump. Jumping is good. Jump is good. Yoo-hoo! Very good, very good, very good. So, anyways, I just want to point out that comes digital technology, and you know this, how addicted we are to this stuff. And this is a fact. All the big manufacturers know it. We know it. And we need to talk about it. There's people who talk a lot about this stuff, right? Apple, Samsung, all big O's, all the Googles of the world have started to integrate tracking mechanisms into the operating systems, right? You have been using the phone for 4.5 hours today. You know the drill. So think about this. That seems to be a connection in terms of our health, not just that we are not physical enough and fit enough because of this stuff, but also that we're overusing it. So we said, if this is the case, we're going to build a game for people who are not physical at all. In this case, we worked with Novartis, big pharma company, market leader in diabetes type 2 medication. Anyone in the room who knows someone who has diabetes type 2? That's not a lot. 3, it should be a third, up to a half. All right, so you were translating, sorry. So diabetes type 2 is amongst those, you can have a seat, have a seat. Sorry. I'm standing, so I didn't realize it. I can't sit, really. I could, now, I'm not. So diabetes type 2, cardiovascular disease, something called smoker's lung, are amongst those illnesses that we call lifestyle illnesses. Lifestyle because they go along with what we do. We eat too fattily, and I love Russian cuisine. I do. We don't work out enough. We sit too much, etc. So we said, or Novartis said, can we create software where people are made physically activated? And can we make it into a game? And so we did this. And this is 4 years ago. Put it out into the App Store. And the app was given, the game was given to a lot of patients in Germany, Finland, Australia. Finland because I don't know, I have friends there, God knows. Met them at night over the vodka, in the sauna. Yes, yes. And you will recognize that there's a bear in there. Barry the bear. So we made this game and we called this Mission Schweinehund, which roughly translates to your own worst enemy, right? A German term for like yourself, basically. So the objective of the game is to overcome this little pig man here who hinders you from regrowing a garden, because we knew demographically that this target group, people who start to have diabetes type 2, 40 plus my age, that they typically like gardening or they take walks, right? So we took all this in. We portrayed the characters here. None of them is slim. None of them is super athletic, because people said when we tested this, like, I don't want to be portrayed like this. I want to be portrayed like this bear, right? I want to have a penguin who eats fat fish in the game, which we have. And he goes hiding behind the tree and smokes a cigarette. So it's very sarcastic. And we used this and tested this with patients, and what we found, and as an academic, I am quite happy with the outcome. Very recently, just 4 weeks ago, we published in one of the, I guess, AAA, most important, most impactful medical journals called the American Journal of Preventive Medicine, because we showed that we could keep up motivation with this game over 24 weeks. And now everyone in the room will have someone who has bought a fitness bike or a fitness band or something. And you know, usually, and I mean a significant amount of people drops and starts not using the device anymore after around about 6 weeks. So over a long, long period of time without big pressure, right? There was nothing like, oh, it's not voluntary, you have to go to see the doctor, etc. People were using this for long. And so we published this and we're very happy. And I just only recently graduated someone whose main work, Christoph Hößmann, this was, and as a sports medical guy. So this was together with the University of Basel in Switzerland. So that's one way to look at the city. Be active in the city. How can you activate people? Another way of combining the two would be to say, okay, let's talk about infrastructure. Okay, we can probably reduce the amount of cars. I'm trying that too. And sort of empower people who use other types of transportation. But we all know how boring it can be to be stuck in traffic, right? And there will be autonomous cars coming. They will be here. Some say 2 years, 3 years. I probably think maybe more 5 years. But it really doesn't matter. What happens with those cars is they give us a lot of time and space to have very, very special gamified experiences, particularly around being in the city. So one thing we did work on 3-4 years ago was we made a prototype for Audi, the car maker, which after a few years, really now, has become a spin-off called HoloRide. Anyone in the car has heard of HoloRide? That's good, because I'm going to show you a video. And here, what we've done here is we basically said there's certain things you do or you experience when you're in the car. There's the steering, there's speeding, there's braking. What if we brought this together with VR? Virtual reality technology. The Oculus Rift, or there's other systems out there, the Sony VR. And as I said, we built the prototype 3-4 years ago. Then there was a pressure cooker within Audi where lots of people had to say, this is kind of magical almost. So if you would be so kind to show the video, thank you. So Audi launched this as a company in January. So that's a promo video, obviously. She's bored, etc., etc. Happens to have a headset with her. So I'll explain to you what happens here in a few words, just so it's clear. This is intended, as of now, for the passenger, right? And in future days for the driver, or when the car self-pilots. And what we do, or the guys do, I'm not part of the team anymore, but as I said, we created the original prototype for this as per Audi's request, is that the scene that you see wearing the goggles knows the speed, the steering, and the location of the car, and the braking, and it renders that into the headset. So what the very interesting, fascinating side effect is there is no motion sickness. For people who usually have motion sickness in cars, the nausea goes away. Why? Because the brain usually, when you play a game, or when you sit in a car, and people who suffer from motion sickness will know this, the brain thinks that you move. Because your eyes tell the brain, you're moving at very high speeds, my friend. But you're not moving physically, right? You're seated. And that causes a big gap between those two senses. What's called proprioception. The self-perception of the body is disrupted by what you see. And basically wearing those goggles and being immersed in the scene takes that away from many, many people who suffer from motion sickness. So that's kind of cool. So imagine you drive through Moscow, you wear the Oculus or whatever headset, and you're being informed about the great history of the city. Or you play against aliens that attack the city, or whatever. Something could be educational about it, something could be about just the relief of the boredom that you experience whilst you are standing in the traffic jam. Or you decide to go cycle, or subshare, or something. So that's another way how you can gamify the city, right? I'll try this. I think it's probably switched off again. Could you go to the next slide, please? We don't have so many more slides, so I think it'll be okay. I'll do it again. That helped. Nope. What's that? Boo. Oh, the magical spell. Boo. Oh, go to the next slide, please. That's the magical spell. So how could you help build the playful city? I hope that I've given you a few ideas about how that might unfold. If you are an architect or an urban planner, you have to take into account digital technologies as they come. Integral part of your work, I would say. If you're a programmer, a mobile developer, then go out, create games. Don't think too much. Thinking is overrated until you then it just come back, bounce back. Next slide, please. And if you are just here because you're curious, then go out, and this is exactly what we will be doing very quickly. Let me just double check the time. I'm doing okay, which is very nice. So if we could have the camera here, please. I've prepared something. We've prepared a few things, two things really. We've prepared a game that we will play now together, the future deck. Here you go, sorry. I'm in the shadow, so I'll stand on the slide. In the shadow. There was a song by that name, right? In the Shadows, a few years ago. You're all too young to know the song. So this is a game that I've made called what you usually call a method deck. This is an ideation tool, so it takes the idea of creating fast or quickly create ideas. It takes that into account, and here I've basically drawn a card. There's a few different colors, And the purple here indicates the goal that we have. And I've chosen this card before we started because I want to create a livable city idea with you, all right? So in the game, you have green cards, and these cards represent growth markets that we have derived from studies from Deloitte and KPMG, you know, the usual suspects who get paid a lot of money to tell you where to go. So advanced manufacturing, tourism, residential aged care, disaster management, your growth idea, we'll leave that out. Food processing, medical research, etc., etc., etc. So what we will do in true hacking spirit is we will draw two cards and then we will converge them towards a livable city idea, all right? Converge mean we'll have to think them together. We'll do this together. So I will come down here to you guys, and who's the lucky one? You. One card, please. And the second card would be from you. All right. Do you want to read out what's there? Personal growth. Parcel delivery. So anyone has an idea how we could think together personal growth and parcel delivery? What's that? We are getting there. Don't think about that yet. It'll come. Let's just think, what could that mean that I want to grow personally? That, of course, could yes, please. Yes? Yep. Yes, sorry. Start again. Start over, please.
There are people who are not mobile enough, and so where they move, they go. I forgot the word.
To the parcel office?
Yeah, and
to the post office.
There is a person who needs a delivery, but for some reason he can't go, he doesn't have time, or he just can't move.
Yeah.
So you go, you get the delivery for him, and then you deliver it, and you get a mobility, and he gets you something nice for that, and you get something nice because you help someone, and that is also a personal growth. So you have a fitness, and you have also like doing.
You've done something good.
Yes.
I love it. What do you think, guys? I like it. I really like it a lot. Now here is where digital technology comes into play. So we've got big data and embedded chips and sensors and all kinds of stuff here. Social network, quantum computing, that'll boost us way beyond things. We'll see. So we're still in the realm of livable city idea. So we'll choose a digital technology that, so I'm gonna, ooh. That was the feedback. Quickly. Hello? Yes. Of course. Read it out.
Device. Mobile device.
Mobile device. Ah. Do you want to choose another one? Too easy.
Volumetric holographic displays.
Yes, we want that. That's good. So volumetric or holographic displays. Everyone has an idea roughly what that could mean? A representation of a computer image that's in the room, that's spatial, right? Which is kind of cool because that's what we're talking about with the city anyways. Like in a way you could say that the city is a volumetric representation of social strata. Ooh, Steffen. Do you want me to say it again? A volumetric representation of social strata. But it's not digital, right? So we'll talk about something that's holographic. Holographic. How could that help us with the parcel delivery idea? Which I like. Microphone, please, for the gentleman. Thank you.
Well, now.
Yep.
Too much pressure. Really.
That's okay.
Yeah.
You can handle it, I know.
Well, we can, instead of actual delivery, we can just express like someone needs not only someone physical to deliver, but also sometimes just someone needs to a good day or a compliment. For example, when you're feeling down, and you can ask for not an actual like
money.
Yeah, but for just someone to
a
deliver
story,
you,
a song,
yes,
a glass of milk.
Yeah, for someone to deliver you not material thing.
All right.
And then there are people who pass by and then can just come to you and deliver the thing that you want.
Okay.
They can give you a song or something like that.
All right.
Although that's not exactly.
That's not volumetric. You had an idea, but that's okay. Thank you so much for the contribution.
I just think that holographic can show what kind of benefit can give this help. I mean, for the person who make it, like show how it's useful for the health or for the physical activity.
Yep.
And another one is about maybe the rate of the good. I mean, for the helpness.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Maybe in some application it can show, for example, 100 people on this day help to deliver these parcels and had activities, made themselves more healthy, more physical, strong.
All right.
Something like this.
I still don't quite buy it. The gentleman there in the back had an idea. Sorry, not you.
Okay, I think that delivering packages using not old-style regular maps on the phone, but using holographic maps will be much more fun.
Aha, yes.
So this is gamification for deliver guys.
Yes, right. It would encourage people because they would follow something, a blob of sorts, right? Yeah. It could be a creature, it could be an avatar that you follow, for example, a 3D representation, who you just follow. By the way, speaking of, Google has just released code where they show pretty much that, because people, when they are pedestrian, often lose their way. They can't navigate, right? All of the navigation that we have today, or pretty much all of it, is very much centered on the car driver, right? So they found that if there is a creature in front of you, a holographic 3D thing, that you see through the screen of the camera, right? That it's easier for many people to follow that creature. Like, it basically walks in front of you. You follow the creature. So we'll do that for the parcel delivery. All right, thank you. Super, so we've created a service here. I'll pass the microphone to you, Jen. Thanks. But now we will attack it. We will attack it. Because life is exciting and things happen. And I want to choose, if you're not too freaked out about it, do you want to choose a card? Yeah? Okay, cool. All right, choose a card. 1. All right. What's on there? Investment. Do you know what that means? You know that, right? When you collect the ruble. Okay, good. Collect all the ruble. Very good. All right, we've got an investment. Who's going to invest into our idea? Who? You? Why? Me? Because it's good. It's a good idea. No, please.
So by the statistic, I sure that 80% of IT investment make money. So I believe in you because you're a rich person, I'm sure. So if you create this idea with us, a lot of persons here who did it. So I'm sure we can make money on this.
I will tell you, you said something, and I have to teach you some German too tonight. There is a very funny German saying that plays with that, which is I'll roughly translate, the devil shits on the big pile. Der Teufel scheißt auf den großen Haufen. Which means people who have money will have more money. It's easy as that. But I still want to go with the investment. Who's going to invest into this idea? In here. Parcel delivery as a communal service, you get rewards for bringing parcels to the post office for people who can't do this. There's some kind of arrangement around that where you get rewarded or you get socially lauded, right? So And we will have a interesting service, an IP that we develop where you follow the graphical representation that takes you to the next post office. Something like that, roundabout. Who's buying into this? Yeah?
Hello.
Hello?
I'll try to guess who will invest in this project.
Yep.
I think the big gamers on the market, for example, DHL or EMS, who is developing their business. They're looking for some benefits and competing each
Yes.
other.
Yep.
They were looking for some interesting things for invite people and involve them for new games, and it can be collecting this game and holographic stuff can developing like different characters, different personages, balancing between for example, inviting some groups of audiences. For example, if they need to invite, I don't know, women,
Yep.
because they young moms, they better know some local places because they traveling all the day between all the houses.
Yep.
For example, they can invite for imagine of the holographic character like a man, for example, man of the dream, or something. So, or kids who developing like by the Pokemon, but developing teenagers, for example, who can bring the puzzles.
Yep.
They able to walk oneself without parents, and they can do a short and quite long distance. And they looking for some, I don't know, characters of the film or favorite characters of the film, or maybe collecting points.
Yep.
And changing it, for example, for some benefits in these companies, and that's called business people to people.
Yep.
So it can bring some ideas, invite people, and make puzzle delivering cheapest and cheapest.
Yep.
For example, for short distances.
I really like that expansion of the idea, but sorry, we have to continue. I'm really, really sorry. We'll talk afterwards, all right? Cool. Very good. I very quickly wanted to show you, we had the impact of investment. There's different other types of impacts, peace and natural disaster and revolution, over-exploration, etc. We won't go into that. Just one thing here, these are ethics cards, so you would usually check the idea on, does this convey mindfulness, is this enjoyable, does this create compassion, does this make us wiser, that kind of stuff, boring stuff, right? And if you're really stuck with an idea, you can then say, oh, something really weird happens, immortality or parallel universe or aliens are landing, or you never know. So thank you very much for this fantastic idea. I really like that, communal, you said people to people. That's a good way to phrase it, I think. So if we could switch back to the last slides, because I'm very much over time now. Apologies for that. We can give ourselves a hand, yes. Because I was thinking, hold on, what happened? Yes, that happened. We're done with that phase, and I think that was very nice. So you see, you can create ideas very quickly, right? You just need to get started, basically, and I think that's something that makes the beauty of bringing play to the city, right? Doesn't have to be complicated. Complications arise anyways. That's what life does. If we could go back to the slides, please. Spell. Slides. No? Because not only could we play the future deck, but I also, when we had the first conversation here for my contribution for my talk, I said to Julia and Anastasia, the program coordinators, give them a hand, by the way. I think they've done a fantastic job. I said, I really would like to give you guys something that you can take with you from this talk, because talking about play and having nothing to play with is stupid, right? So the thing that I thought, and I will show you this here, is I said, what if we had paper? And on that paper, we had a few tips how to bring playfulness into the city, like make someone smile, or start dancing, but don't be ashamed in the middle of a public place. People think you're crazy, but just do it, right? And a few other things. And what if we put instructions on here, how you can fold this up into a paper plane. But, to take this a little bit further, what if the paper contains seeds, flower seeds? And if you throw the paper plane somewhere, you don't need it anymore, it will degrade, because the paper basically nurtures the flower seeds, and you bring flowers into Moscow or wherever you go after tonight. Try that. Try that, but only do this where you're allowed to do it, right? And for everyone who's leaving now, there's a sheet of this paper waiting for you at the exit, all right? I want to thank you very much for your attention and for the honor to be here and speak to you guys. I've really enjoyed my stay in Moscow, and hopefully maybe someday I can be back. And you go out and be playful, alrighty?